Hi, I'm Dave Barnes.
And I'm John McLaughlin.
And welcome to Dadville.
Dadville is a podcast where we talk about life, love, and the pursuit of awesome dadding.
It's funny thoughts and deep talks.
So please, enjoy your time here in Dadville and enjoy this episode with...
Field Yates. So, so I look at the banker and I said, the final pitch is we give the animals away during Christmas. That's why we call it Santa Paws. And nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, you had the gun in your hand.
I didn't know he could see it.
Oh, okay.
But I did think it at least elicited a laugh. I'm like pointing a gun, like, you better laugh. But nothing, man.
Yeah.
And even the cop on the way to the station, nothing. It was so frustrating.
Well, look, 2 years in community service is pretty lenient.
That's fair.
I think you got off scot-free.
That's fair.
All right.
John.
Yeah.
I can tell already from this conversation, I know what you're thinking.
Oh.
You're looking and you're thinking, how do I tame this incredibly luscious beard?
See, okay, so that thought just ran through my mind, and it runs through my mind on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Okay, but wait, let me tug on that.
No, stop. It's real. It's real.
Let me just grab it.
No doubt. It's
See, I knew it.
Okay.
Fake beard.
Well,
Knew it.
it was
But
somebody's
listen,
beard.
for those of you who do have beards,
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what you need. You need the Beard Hedger Pro Kit from Manscaped.
That's it. That's the one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Dave, the sun is peeking back out.
So warm.
Spring is afoot,
Ah.
which means you're going to have to show your face in the daylight again, and Manscaped is here to help you achieve award-winning scruff.
Yes.
Whether you're sporting a glorious beard flow or some, smooth, sleek cheeks.
Okay, John, let's dive into what you get with this kit, okay? First,
let's go.
You get the Beard Hedger.
Yep.
Which was my nickname in high school, by the way. It was
That's right.
Weird season, but it was a good one. A waterproof cordless trimmer with a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting links, all with one
insane.
guard, okay? I bet there's even a Johnny Mac scruff setting, which
Oh,
I asked
it's my
for.
signature
I asked
style.
for that.
Yeah. A lot of people ask for it.
Yeah.
Check this out. The titanium-coated T-blades are tough on hair, but smooth on your face.
Thank you.
Leading to a single stroke efficiency that brings satisfaction one stroke at a time.
That's what they said about you in the pool, also in junior high.
That's right.
And the Beard Hedger is a high-tech piece of art
Yep.
in a travel-sized package with a long-lasting battery, universal charging, and a strong motor.
That's right. But the Pro Kit, it doesn't stop there, Dave.
No,
We're not even
stop.
done.
No.
It also comes with liquid goods to make you feel good. Start with the beard shampoo and conditioner.
I will.
Specially designed to moisturize, reduce ingrown hairs. We don't want those.
Yep.
And replenish your beard's natural oils.
And with the nutrient-infused beard oil, you can relieve dryness on both your beard and the skin beneath while adding a little shimmer and shine to liven up the look. Cap it off with the Beard Balm, a pomade that shapes, styles, and moisturizes, bringing the amazing scent of fresh eucalyptus, rosemary, and I'll let you guess the last one.
But it's lavender. I want it to be lavender.
It is. You got your wish.
Yes. All right. And as a special bonus, Dave, the Beard Hedger Pro Beard Kit also comes with 3 free gifts.
Not 3. That's
3.
too many. That's too
I
many.
know, but they did it anyway.
Okay.
A beard brush,
No.
comb,
No, don't say
and
scissors.
scissors
I
to
knew it.
ensure your beard is ready to impress.
Save 20% off and free shipping with the code DADVILLE at manscaped.com.
That's 20% off and free shipping with the code DADVILLE at manscaped.com. Focus on the face and use the Beard Hedger Pro Kit for the cleanest look in the game.
How are you guys doing? Thank you so much for having me.
Look, this is...
Dude, thank you for coming on, man.
I can't tell you how excited we are about this. This is...
It's a dream to have you on, dare I say.
Say it.
Wow.
It's been
There
a
it is.
fantasy.
I knew it. Well, haha.
I might have a couple more of those throughout the
I'm so ready.
interview.
Sprinkled throughout. You know what's funny, Field, as we're sitting here talking to you, and everybody, we're coming in hot with Field Yates here, but it is crazy. Like, I'm having this weird Pavlovian response to your voice, and it's really bothering me because I'm so used to hearing you talk, and especially, it's really interesting what my brain is doing right now. It's like, I just want to listen. I'm realizing, no, we're actually
first of
talking.
all,
No, this is...
Imagine how I'm feeling when I'm thinking about you guys, right? Like I'm hearing
That
your
is
voices.
not what Dave
That
normally
is not what I
does
do. I'm a
during the
talker.
interviews.
That's just...
Yeah.
It's the way I'm wired. It's good, it's bad. It's what it is.
Yeah, it's funny. I do love the reactions you get when you meet someone who might be a listener, viewer, reader, whatever it might be. And it is funny that I do hear what you're sort of referring to quite often, Dave, where it's like, I hear you and I expect you to speak in a different way or speak faster or slower, more professional, less professional. I don't even know it. And the one that always cracks me up is if you're in a place like a bar, I don't know, a brewery, a place where you are for maybe not an indefinite period of time, but long enough that you can strike up a conversation. Like you're not crossing somebody at like an airport bathroom where you're there for like 90 seconds max between like taking a leak and also like washing your hands. It's kind of awkward anyways to talk in an airport bathroom. But if you're somewhere where you can have like a semi-thoughtful conversation, at the end of it, people will be like, dude, I totally did not think you'd be a good guy. I'm like, whoa, excuse me?
This
So,
is
like,
an
you're way
ecosystem
cooler.
why is
Thought
that?
you'd be. I'm like, man, do I come across as that smug? Like, they're just like, no. And I think often, you guys can relate to this, having careers and lives in the public eye, that like, I think there is this weird sort of bridge that's been, it's just like this mentality sometimes that people that maybe are semi-public or very public figures don't have time for the lay human. And I always laugh at that. I'm like, I may have a job that you are more familiar with than maybe my neighbor's job or, my cousin's job. But, I'm still like, I was still raised to have manners and be polite. And I still enjoy like human interaction that isn't just talking about whether I think, some player's a valuable sleeper in fantasy football or not.
You're like, people are expecting you to just put cigarettes out on their forehead in the middle of conversation.
I've only done that like 7 times. And each time I thought there was a reason to do it.
Gonna say.
And that's acceptable, I think. At your age, 7's fine.
Yeah.
I also feel like the added layer there is when they hear your voice, it is coming from a portion of their life that I'm going to go out on a limb and say they already feel kind of guilty about, right?
Yes.
They already so that's in the soup right there. Also, when they hear your voice, it's often telling them the things they should have done that they feel shame about. So there's guilt and shame come right in hot.
Definitely.
What a
Yes.
cocktail.
Just from the top.
What a cocktail to
Yeah.
have to deal with on a daily basis in your life, Felix, just every day.
Then we pivot and talk about more normal stuff. The next thing you know, we're talking about, I don't even know, what, climate control or something.
Yeah,
and
that's
then all
right.
of a sudden it gets back to more familial, sort of just like we're all in this for the same reason type of conversation.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've just come in hot because we're just chums, guys. We're just BFFs, the three of us. But I want to back up because we always do our brag sheet to let people know a little bit more about all of our guests. So Field Yates is with us today, which again is just it's not just it's a big deal, but I mean we're in some pretty this is some rarefied air for us because this is a professional podcaster. I mean, this is a guy. I mean, you know the ways of the podcast, and so we could slip up at any moment here, and that's what I'm trying to get out in the front.
I've mastered that, so don't worry. I'm
Thank
very
you.
good
As
at
long
it.
as you don't-
A lot of years, a lot of probably thousands of episodes now, and I've certainly slipped up many
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
So we share that.
It's a safe
that trait,
space.
don't
That's-
worry.
We haven't.
Yeah,
yet,
we've
but
had
this could be the
we're on
episode.
115 perfect episodes. Okay, so a little bit about Field. Here we go. Graduated. Well, let's start here. I like this. Interned with the New England Patriots during high school and college. Which, man, that's someone who knows what they want to do at a very young age. It's impressive. Graduated Wesleyan University in 2009 with a degree in psychology. So obviously, working at ESPN, everybody sees that trajectory immediately. Played football and lacrosse there. What did you play? What position there?
I was a safety in football.
Yep.
I was a defenseman in lacrosse, but honestly, and I'm not trying to be, this is not one of those appearances where you come on and you just like downplay your accomplishments and you try to be humble. Like, bad at both. Very much like a end of bench player. Like there was a moment during like my freshman and sophomore year in both sports where I kind of thought like maybe I'd break through and become like a starter on these 2 programs. And those moments never really came to be. That being said, like there were a couple of games like mop-up duty was kind of my thing. So yeah, but I played and, really the value in those was not just, I obviously love those sports and I love being a part of a team, but some of my best friends in the world are my teammates from college, which has been the most impactful part of my college experience.
Yeah.
Is that, 5 of my groomsmen were my 5 best friends
Oh, wow.
during my college years. So that's been cool to have that, and they are all, I think 4 or 5 of them are all dads as well. So we have all kinds of, our conversations and the things we talk about have certainly evolved in the past. I graduated college 13, 14 years ago now, so things have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
That
those are
is
the good old
amazing.
days.
And some would say that the trophies that you left with were the friendships that you gained. I'm going to digress. Okay, former member of Kansas City Chiefs coaching staff. worked in the scouting and coaching department, and also served as assistant to head coach Todd Haley, which is, I mean, this is such a fascinating pedigree here. Started working at ESPN in 2012. That's been a minute. I mean, you've been there for a decade now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you do the math, but I was before.
Nuts.
It's been a decade. Started by covering Patriots for ESPN Boston, so obviously a very strong Patriots been there in the bio. Co-hosts fantasy focused podcast, which everybody listening is like, yeah, we know that. That's exact. We all are having the same Pavlovian response to his voice that you are, and the shame that John inferred. Hosts ESPN2's Sunday pregame show. Fantasy Football Now serves as a contributor to Monday Night Football, NFL Live, Sports Center, and also, I mean, this is just so impressive. I'm having to scroll to get to these. Fantasy Show and ESPN's NFL draft coverage. So one of the things that we love to ask, which I'm so curious to see what you say, when you hear that now, like what are you thinking? Like when you hear what you've done, where your life has gone, what you're doing now, which is incredible. Like would 12-year-old Field, is he going, yeah, that's the trajectory, kind of know what I'm trying to do here, or are you sitting, or is he going, whoa, that's out of nowhere?
Totally out of nowhere. It's all by sort of mistake. To be truthful, so what I did know when I was 12, and it led me to the beginning portion of my sort of working career, was I wanted to be a football coach. I knew that when
were those quotes again?
That was just
Did
sort
you
of
throw up
expressing.
some quotes?
I wasn't gonna, no, I'll get the quotes later. That was just a sort of, I talk with my hands sometimes. It's a nervous tick or something. So I wanted to be a football coach. I knew that at a very young age because I knew that while I loved football, I was never going to be athletic enough to go and play at the NFL level. So I wanted to be a football coach.
You knew that at 12 years old.
Probably
you were thinking
younger. Like there was a game. I think it was a Thanksgiving game in '95. I'm 35 now. I'm born in April of '87, and I think my parents recall like 1995 Thanksgiving football game where there was a play that took place, and I can't promise you it was particularly high level insight, but I was breaking it down as if I were more a coach than I were a player in my own brain, at least. And again, I'm sure I was just like, hey, they threw the ball to the left side of the field. I would always throw the ball left if I were a coach, right? Meanwhile, I hear these play calls that are actually passed along from a head coach to a quarterback during a game, and I'm like, that's a Rosetta Stone required playbook. Like you literally need to study for 8 years before you understand 1/10 of it. But I thought I was going to be an NFL head coach one day, and that was what led me to my experience with both the Patriots and the Chiefs. And what you'll often hear, or if you talk to somebody who's in the coaching or scouting business, a lot of times it's like, if you'd like to go into coaching or scouting, it would be great to start on one path or the other. But if you're trying to become a coach and there's only a scouting job available to start, take that, get in the building, the proverbial building, and you'll figure it out from there. So that was kind of where I was as I started in scouting, because there was an opportunity there with the Chiefs after my time in New England. And I thought I was going to be a head coach. And I really wish, and I've had a lot of time to create to be honest with you, just sort of like a white lie about what happened. But I really wish what I could tell people is that when I left Kansas City in 2011, when I was 24 years old, and I decided to pivot away from working in football, scouting, or coaching, I really wish I could tell people that like the plan was, I'm going to leave this, I'm going to go get in TV, work at ESPN, and try to become a podcaster and TV personality. That was not the plan at all. To be honest with you guys, I had moved to the Midwest, moved to Kansas City, Missouri, which is just a sort of like a point of just how naive I was. When I got on the plane to Kansas City the first time, I thought I was going to Kansas City, Kansas, which Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas they do border each other, right? But I thought Kansas City was in Kansas. I just sort of assumed that was how it worked. So it was very sort of this was totally new ground for me. And after a few years out there, and maybe I regret this, but I try not to live with too much regret in life. But I felt like those first few years out of college, I'm from Boston, outside of Boston. Went to school in Connecticut. Most of my friends are from New England, and it's like their experience when they're 22 years old, right out of college, is like, hey, we're all meeting up at this bar, in like the Upper East Side, or down in like the East Village. Like, you want to meet up and go? It's like, yeah, I mean, I'll get on a plane tomorrow and be there in 27 hours. I'll see you then, right? High school reunions, even just we're all going to go buy tickets and go meet up at listen, we're going to go to the Dadville live show podcast, whatever, in Boston this weekend or something. And I think I was feeling like there was a chance that I'd kind of committed myself to one track. And if I never left, would I eventually look back when I was 40 or in so far deep that I had a family that kind of needed me to continue down that path in order for us to, continue to put food on the table. And I don't know if chicken out's the right word, but I sort of figured maybe it was time to try something else just in case.
Wow.
And then something else became this. So very much not by design. Like I never had visions of working in football media, but feel very fortunate that I got lucky to step away when I did, because I do recall conversations with coaches and scouts that were 20 years into it that just said, like, if you don't think this is for you forever, do it now. Because I'm I've got 3 kids and I got, a mortgage and I've got, high school or college educations to pay for, that like, if I leave this, like there is no, like it's harder to start fresh when you're, 40 years old than when you're 23, 24 years old. So that was kind of the origins of my ESPN story, and very much not by design.
So what was your first gig at ESPN? What were you doing then?
So the Patriots, when I was still living in Boston at the time, I now live down in Connecticut, which is where ESPN's located, in a town called Bristol, which pretty much is ESPN. Like that's kind of, it's what it's known for sure, and it certainly is the most notable business in the town. But there was a guy who's actually one of my best friends now. His name is Mike Reese, who covers the Patriots for ESPN. We've got one reporter for every NFL team.
Yeah.
And Mike, I'm going to overdo it with storytelling, but that's what podcasts are
come
for.
on, man.
I sent an email out. I was trying to I've been writing for my own blog, a Tumblr blog, and then I tried to do some free websites, places that were kind of in the aggregation business. And then I was using those as like kind of a resume to send out to various stations. And it was like 41 different places locally. And I consider locally like greater Boston area, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, a little bit of Connecticut. And I got an email back from one person, and it was this guy named Mike Reese. And he responded within, I'll never forget this part now, 11 minutes. And I'm like, wow, like I went 0 for 40 except for him, who responded literally 11 minutes later. And he just said, hey, I appreciate you reaching out. It was in the middle of the season, and he's a very busy guy. The Patriots that year went to the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was a long season, and those are intense years when you're covering a team of that stature. And he said, let's just stay in touch. I can't promise anything, but let's be in touch. And let's be in touch turned into him offering me to come to the 2012 NFL Draft. When the Patriots had 2 first-round picks. And he said, it might be a busy night tonight. I could use maybe a helping hand. And the draft turned into, are you around for OTAs, which for those that aren't super familiar with the football calendar, is the like May and June portion of the NFL season, where guys are at their home facilities working out. It's not in pads. It's sort of like a kind of a glorified walkthrough, but not quite that rudimentary, but also not full bore practices. And then OTAs turned into, are you going to be around for training camp? And that was how it all started. So I kind of just got going on the Patriots beat, and ESPN quickly realized that, Mike is sensational at his job. We don't need 2 people doing one job. And so it allowed, they said, hey, well, we see you have a background in other things as well, which included scouting and some coaching. So can we sort of tap into that? And I admire this about ESPN, is that they're a company that if you can do one thing, they say, well, can you do 2? If you can do 2, can you do 5, 10, 10 turns into 20, and next thing you know, you've got a full plate. And so things kind of just stacked on top of each other. And a few years into that included fantasy football coverage. And my boss, Seth Markman, told me, he said, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but fantasy football is crazy popular, and it's not going away. And you may think of fantasy in a very different light as real football, but I'm just telling you, a lot of what we talk about in real football is applicable to fantasy football.
Wow.
And there are times when real football stories, are more notable from a fantasy angle than they are a real football angle. And this is one example which is probably pertinent to both, but like Christian McCaffrey got traded in the middle of this season from the Carolina Panthers to the San Francisco 49ers, and he's made a huge impact on the 49ers for sure. But that story was not just interesting to Panthers and 49ers fans. And by the way, at that time, the 49ers were not playing anywhere like they are right now. It was interesting to everybody because it was like that was the 2nd or 3rd player taken in fantasy drafts. What does it mean for his outlook? Who's the man who's going to replace him? When he goes to San Francisco, is he just going to send other guys to the bench who had been playing? Yeah. And I realized quickly that people love fantasy football. And they love fantasy football so much that anything even tangentially related to fantasy football, they have an interest in. And I love that about it.
So what was your take on fantasy at that time? Like when they mentioned that to you, were you like involved in fantasy leagues? Did you play?
Yeah, I'd been playing up to that point, and it was, I think I was at the stage of my career, and I hope to kind of always keep this attitude, but I was certainly much more profound at that point where I was open to anything. And they could have told me, hey, we want you to go cover an entirely different sport, and I would have been receptive to it. But I was open to it. I had been playing it, and my feeling was, well, I have a lot of fun when I play it with my high school and college friends, so let's give it a shot. And I also realized that as somebody who at the time was 25, 26 years old and was trying to like make a more notable mark on the ESPN landscape, this might be an opportunity. And I don't know that I knew at the time just how much of an opportunity it was going to end up being, but it's become something that I always tell people, if I meet 20 fans on the street, I think 19 of them at minimum are going to say, like, who should I take first in my fantasy draft next year? It's much more often that than it is like, so I saw your take on Dak Prescott on NFL Live recently. Like, what are your thoughts on his throwing on the run mechanics? No, it's like, am I taking Christian McCaffrey or Justin Jefferson number 1 overall next year?
You know, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that because I had him on my team this year. I had Christian on my team this year. I call him Christian. And literally one of the I feel like we're close. I think about him a lot. I know that much. But it's funny because I immediately went to y'all's take on knowing that suddenly it was a split backfield. You know, it's all the things that fantasy guys know. I was like, well, he's the only guy in Carolina. I mean, this is great for the 49ers, great for him, but this could be terrible from a fantasy team. So I was just like, everything y'all put up, I was like, I was one of those guys, to your point, where suddenly, the thing that's crazy too, Field, is that if you think about your pedigree and what you came up in, those things all translate to what you're doing. I mean, scouting reports, like anything that you're doing where you're looking at it, all is plug and play with fantasy football, That's kind of how I feel. Is that I feel like when when Christian McCaffrey gets traded or somebody, it's, all right, who's the next person up? Oh, it's Deontay Foreman. Okay, well, what kind of player is Deontay Foreman in my estimation? And while it's great that he might get, let's say, 15 or 18 carries a game now, if he's not very good, like not every carry is created equally. So Deontay Foreman getting 15 or 18 carries is different than prime Emmitt Smith getting 15 or 18 carries. So I was able to kind of I do feel like I apply some of that stuff daily. And I always tell people, because to your point about like just sort of like hearing our take, is what I always tell people about fantasy analysis is that I don't know that our job is to bring all this proprietary info that you can't find somewhere else. A lot of the stuff that I feel often aligns with how some of my competitors feel, and that's okay. I tell people that like our job is to take all these different pieces of information and put them into a tiny package that you can, and we, in our case, it's a podcast that if you have 60 minutes when you're, driving to the studio or you're in between a session or you're whatever, you just picked up, you're waiting for your kids to come out from school or whatever it is, right? You can consume it and hopefully do it in a way that's entertaining, because there is, and I don't need to tell this to musicians, right? But like, I'm sure you guys know thousands of very talented musicians that have never made $1 off of their work, despite the fact that they are insanely good at what they do, right? That's how fantasy, it's probably not quite as competitive in our field, I can't imagine, but it is certainly a space where standing out is an important trait. So this, John and I were laughing as we were kind of prepping for this. Are you the guy? I'm laughing. Are you the guy that like everybody you've ever known that has your number, like during the football season, is your phone just on fire with like, dude, what, somebody gets like with Christian McCaffrey trade? Is it just like the guy that you knew for 15 minutes on your t-ball team in 5th grade, who you ran into at the bar 6 years ago, is suddenly like, bro, hope you're well. Hey, quick question. What should I do? I mean, are you just that guy?
I would imagine you would have like copy and paste ready responses. So, like you see Christian McCaffrey just got traded.
Just go to my Twitter feed, you idiots. Why do you think I do this?
Okay, first of all, you guys, your instincts are off the charts, because this is exactly it. So during the preseason, I always get a series of texts that are something to the effect of like, hey man, I need a sleeper. I've got my draft tomorrow. So on the Notes app, I put together like, and it changes depending on the news, just sort of a copy and paste version that I can take and resend in short order. And then I put together, I call it like a cheat sheet because it's not particularly innovative, but it's just like a top 100 rankings. And I put a one-liner. Number 1, Christian McCaffrey. Hey, averaged 22.8 fantasy points per game last year. Tops amongst all players. Number 2, Justin Jefferson. Led all NFL players in receptions and receiving yards, right?
Yeah.
1 to 100. And I tell people that, if I haven't updated in a week and 5 days ago some guy tore his ACL, like, it's on you to know some of that information. Like, I can't be responsible for every single piece of information that takes place. But I hope that you are in tune enough to, all right, I'm not going to draft the guy that's not going to play this year.
Right.
But I'm funny that John mentioned, the people that I haven't talked to, because I was just joking, or I was just with one of my very good friends and a colleague of mine, Mike Clay at ESPN, who's also on the podcast. And it was the day before Christmas, because Christmas this year was on a Sunday. So we moved our show on Sunday up to Saturday. And we were laughing because we were both looking at our phones like before the show, and we both got like text, and I think Mike had just got one from a friend, and it was, "Hey man, just wanted to check in and wish you guys Merry Christmas." And then it was like ...
Pause.
"Hey, also just curious, wondering if I should play, Terry McLaurin over Chris Godwin this week." And it's like, hold on, like, just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas. I've told people this before. I'd rather you quit with the pleasantries. Like, I get it. It's a business transaction, man. Like,
You're
you
just
don't
giving
really
me
care
more
how
to
I'm
read.
doing. Like, you're asking me, like, what's, like, how's Boston? I'm like, I moved, like, years ago, right? They don't know I have a kid. They don't know that, like, I'm married. Like, I'm happy to tell you, like, which player you should start. Like, But I'm like, it's okay, man. Like, I get it. Like, sometimes, like, you have information you need to know, and that's you do what you need to do to get that information.
I love that you copy paste. I mean, that is just genius.
And I actually don't mind. I don't mind when someone doesn't give me a 30-word intro asking how I am. Like, I'm okay if you just text me. I haven't talked to you. Hey, would you start this player or this player? The only one that bothers me, there's only one, is when someone will reach out and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting Dak Prescott over Kirk Cousins this week. What would you do? Or who would you play, Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins?" And I reply, "Hey, I've got Dak. I like the matchup better. Think he's been playing good ball of late. I play Dak." And they reply with, "Really?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, really? Like, did I stutter? Like, could I have been any less clear that I'd play Dak?" And I'm like, "Did you ask me because you wanted my opinion, or did you ask me because you wanted confirmation of
Yes, yes.
Totally.
And in this case, your own opinion was, I kind of want to play Cousins, but I want Field to tell me to play Cousins. So those are the only ones that when someone responds back really, or like I said, sort of counterpunch, I do not try to leave text message replies blank. But that's one where I just say, I have to do it.
They're like, how can
I'm really gonna...
be the sports genius analyst that I am if you're disagreeing with me right now? Something must be wrong.
Yeah.
Well, it just seems like a fundamentally wrong approach to get you what you're looking for.
So I'm curious.
I could be wrong though. Maybe I'm the sucker.
You at a young age have already you've been in the business since high school, right? So the like explosion of fantasy craze has happened during your tenure, and I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on how do you feel like it has affected football, or like professionally, or the sport at large, and maybe any other trends that you see with because fantasy obviously isn't just the NFL. How do you think fantasy has affected sports overall? I
think the NFL will admit this, but maybe not necessarily as strongly as I will tell you is the case. Fantasy football has just this massive impact on the league's popularity. Football is obviously going to be extremely popular. If you go and look at the end of the year, it's like of the 50 highest rated primetime shows, it's often like 47 or 48 of them are an NFL game. Like the World Cup final every 4 years will probably jump ahead of it. I don't know, like the Golden Globes or something, if there's an inauguration or something like that. If there's an election night, like those kind of things can jump ahead in line. But generally speaking, it's football, and more football. But I always tell people is that what fantasy does is it allows us all to have a vested interest that supersedes the teams. I'll be sitting there on and it's my profession. I watch this stuff. I'm going to watch it, right? I love it. But I've got friends who all of a sudden it'll be Thursday night. It'll be like Commander Saints, and they will be like locked in on the TV. And meanwhile they're like, they're a Chargers fan, and I'm like, why do you care about Commanders and Saints? And they're like, well, I've got Alvin Kamara in fantasy, and that's why I care, right? And it's done so much for the league's popularity in that regard. And I think that what I love about fantasy football that I think is important is that I equate it to the NCAA basketball tournament in this regard that, there was once fewer teams than 64, and now we're up to technically 68. When I think of the NCAA tournament, every March, 64 teams play a single elimination bracket, and one team is crowned the champion. And it's a 3-week blitz that I love, and whether it's I don't even care what the number one seed is. Like, I will live for like Valparaiso beating Illinois in the 5-12 game. Like, that's the stuff that gets me fired up, and it's every single year. Fantasy football, like, I play in leagues that I've been in for a dozen years. We haven't touched the rule book once. There's nothing we have to change. The beauty of it is that every Sunday or Thursday, Sunday, Monday, the games themselves that are being played are all we need to make it an awesome experience. And so I think that other areas that could be maybe not as powerful, but certainly add layers of intrigue to football that go beyond just watching the game. I think sports betting is the one that everybody obviously has identified. And I enjoy sports betting. I enjoy not just like the physical process of doing it, but I enjoy sort of the strategy and the thinking behind it. Identifying favorable lines, willing to roll the dice when needed. I think the big difference maker in that, pretty rudimentary, is that like you're putting money up when you bet, right? And some people just aren't equipped. Like, there are some people that aren't equipped and still lose money anyways, the degenerates, right? There are people that just aren't equipped to, right? They're like, I live paycheck to paycheck. I can't afford to just $25 tonight and then another $50 tomorrow and then $100 on Saturday. Like, fantasy, you may have a buy-in. Many of them are nominal, right? And some of them have no buy-ins. And I play in leagues where the winner gets a case of beer, and that's it. And is it a little bit different when you win $1,000 for a league as opposed to a case of beer? Maybe, but beer tastes pretty good too. So, there's still the enjoyment. Like, you still want to win that case of beer really badly. Yeah. So, I think betting is going to have a pretty profound impact, especially once we see more and more in-arena betting, because soon enough it's going to be an NBA game where the Suns are beating the Clippers 97-82 in the fourth quarter, and you're going to have the opportunity to bet whether the Clippers come back and win the game or lose by less than 10. And it's probably already happening in some places already, but that's the kind of stuff that people just like action. We do. We like to be involved. I think, and Twitter's a good example of this as well, is that like, we don't just watch the game anymore. We watch the game and we communicate with our friends on Twitter because we want to be a part of something more than just the game itself.
So I just need you to buy in. It's going to be a milkshake place. We'll do smoothies too. Called, wait for it, We Are the World, but WHIRLED.
Oh, like World.
World, yeah.
Like World.
So it's a
Pool.
50% buy-in. Annie and I are in if you'll do it.
Okay. And it's all Bitcoin. That's the place where I'm getting hung up.
But BYT, which is something we're starting here in 12 South. But you can get in.
Give me 18 months to think about it.
That's fair.
Is that cool?
That's what everybody said so far, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's true, and it's loving, and that's what I love about you, John.
Right.
You know what today's episode and my morning cup of Joe is brought to you by, guess what, John?
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Let's sing it together.
Methodical coffee. You want to hear some methodical coffee right now?
I do. Here it is.
Here we go.
Oh, now everybody wants to go get some. Everybody wants to go get some.
Methodical roasts their coffee to best express the life it lived, the place, the weather, the soil, and to honor the skilled people who cultivated it.
That's exactly right.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, John, I don't know if you remember this. This is a big moment. We have a signature Dadville blend of
That's
methodical
right.
coffee.
How could I forget? It's the fuel that gets me going
I know.
every morning.
It's filled with hints of, and just like John and I, it's filled with hints of chocolate,
We're a little chocolatey.
graham,
We're a little Grammy.
and brown sugar.
Brown sugary.
Yeah, that's true.
You should also check out the Costa Rican and Brazilian coffees that make up the belly warmer.
Oh, goodness gracious. Also my favorite dance. Methodical offers a wide variety of flavor profiles that range from classics that are bold and chocolatey, contemporary that are medium-bodied and fruity, and all the way to avant-garde that push conventions.
They push those conventions. Yeah, they do. That's probably why Gear Patrol voted Methodical one of the best roasters in America.
Visit methodicalcoffee.com for more information and use the discount code DADVILLE for 10% off your first order.
That's methodicalcoffee.com and use the code DADVILLE for 10% off your first order.
This show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Johnny,
Yes.
what was the last thing you learned about yourself?
I think it could have been that I really respond well to improv prompts.
I would agree with that.
like that.
Yep.
Or that therapy is really helpful.
John, you know where we're going with this.
I do.
BetterHelp is an online therapy service that connects you wherever you are, on tour, vacation, or even on a cruise ship.
It's a great way to learn better coping skills, how to communicate more effectively, and how to even turn the temp down on daily stress.
Yeah, some days you just need to find a way to get your feelings out.
That's right. I would recommend to anyone interested in giving therapy a try to head to betterhelp.com. It's convenient, flexible, and it fits with anyone's schedule.
All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can move to a new therapist anytime you want.
That's right. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/dadville today and get 10% off your first month.
That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Dadville, and get 10% off your first month.
It's like equivalent to, this is such a random thought that I've never thought before, but it feels equivalent to, in music, like in a live setting, everyone having an iPhone in their hand. You know what I mean? Like back in the day, it used to be like, if you're a Celtics fan, that's your team. You had franchise players. You had Larry Bird as your guy, you know, and when you're at the game, everybody's watching the game. When you're at the show, everybody's watching the show. And now it's like you're watching the show, but you also have, everyone has, you know, if there's 1,000 people there, you have 1,000 different, you know, recording devices that are sending it out. There may be live streaming. There's like, everyone has their world attached to it and their lens that they're watching it through. That I think has good and bad, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna flip the script on you guys. Like, what is your feeling as you're performing and you're pouring your heart and soul? I mean, it's literally your professional livelihood. And while it's great that you've got people that support and care enough to be there, are you ever like, let's just take it all in? You know, like, it's going to be like, yes, the video is cool to have it on your phone, but the experience is way like, if the video did it justice, you wouldn't have to go to the concert in the first place, right? Or go to the show in the first place. So
Well, the videos, I think
always the lighting sucks.
Yeah,
you can like barely hear.
Well, that is the thing that is so tricky about getting videos at shows is that, and I had to learn this really early into my career, is so much of what makes, and you said it really well too there, Field, like so much of what makes the live show so compelling are so many things that don't translate on a medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get yourself in trouble and you're kind of like, oh, you know, here he is doing the solo. And then the artist goes back and watches like, oh man, I'm a little out of time and I was rushing and I didn't get that note exactly right. But in the minute, nobody's thinking about that because the energy in the room and the band is a certain volume and the drummers, and it's just all happening. And so the problem I think that happens with us is it's how it gets translated, because then, you know, everybody posts it online and it's terrible. People are watching like, God, and you'll even have comments like, God, that solo sucked. And they're like, well, no, that's not why I posted. 'Cause I posted because the solo was amazing, but this version of it that's without all of the other intangibles, you know, makes it sound like this, you know, it just sounds awful because you don't have the other things, what had just happened or what was about to happen or what you couldn't see on stage was happening. So I think that's the other thing that gets tricky about it is to John's point. It's like you can never really take the whole thing away. You know, it's one thing. So one thing I wanted to ask before we get out of the fantasy world, which sadly I never do in my brain. Do you feel like the way that the NFL players feel about fantasy is changing, or do you? From my limited perspective, it feels like to me more guys are really taking it on as like. And I love of course, as a fantasy player, you love when the guys are like, hey, I'm playing this week, guys, put me in. Or like, this is for all my fantasy, guys, like that extra touchdown. Yeah. But there's also those guys who are like, they hate it, and they're like, which you kind of understand because you have the guys that'll get online and they're just idiots sending these ridiculous messages, that you're like, come on, this is we're talking about literally something we're playing and then a real life thing. But do you feel like that the league and really just the players are taking it on more?
So there are players, and none more so than Austin Eckler, who, by the way, was as good of a player in fantasy as there was this year for the Chargers, who embraced it to the point that, like, Austin has increased his visibility, I think his likability, his relatability, every ability possible. Yeah. By so much this year because he's embraced it more than ever. Like the day before, I want to say the fantasy championship, or like 2 days before, he popped up on the injury report, and it was not something significant. When a player gets listed to the injury report out of nowhere, all of us freak out. We're like, oh my God, Austin Eckler was eliminated because of a toe injury. And I'm telling you, like within like an hour of the report, the injury report, which is issued by the team, being released, Austin had posted like an Instagram story, and he was like, hey, I want to let you guys all know I'm good. I'm going to play on Sunday. I would never let my fantasy managers down. And like, I think the world of him as a fantasy player, but even more so as a human because he's been so smart about embracing it. And I get it. There's a nasty side to it, right? Like, if this were we're having this conversation the day after the Cowboys beat the Bucs, and if it were the regular season and you had Brett Maher, the Cowboys kicker, as your kicker, he missed 4 extra points last night, you would be livid with him, and stuff would be pretty nasty. There'd be a lot of vitriol that would probably turn someone like Brett Maher away from Twitter or any other social media. And I get that side to it. I also have a feel like, for good or bad, I guess not for good. For good, I'm okay with it, but for like never tweet players. Just never do it. There's no use. Like, it reveals so much more about you than it does them. Right. But I do think there are players that embrace it, and I think it's really helped them. I think Austin's like probably an outlier because of just how far he's gone. He has a podcast with Yahoo. Like he literally is like once a week. He's like, oh yeah, like this Dameon Pierce from the Texans. He's really impressive to me. Like he's very crazy. He's definitely like, the part that sucks is that like he's going to crush fantasy as a player for like the next 7 years, and then he's going to get hired at ESPN, and I'm going to become like, I'm just going to become like a bumper sticker on the wall. I'm like, yeah, he had a good run, but like,
oh my gosh,
it's Austin Eckler here.
Well,
right?
it's so smart too, because to your point, those guys, athletic career, especially in football, you're a rarity if you're playing into your 30s. So, those guys can have other jobs, and a guy like that could translate into so many cool opportunities post-career because you said it so well, and I never thought about this Field, like just his kind of likability goes through the roof. And so all of a sudden, people are like, what he'd be great on? And then, you have all these opportunities post-football.
Yeah, I think that like Q Score, does that still exist, Q Score? I feel like that was a bigger thing back in the day. As I say that, is it back in the day, the 35-year-old says. But if Q scores still do exist, I feel like those players who embrace fantasy see a higher Q score. Yeah. And Eckler's a good example of it, but Leonard Fournette for the Bucs has talked about it before. Like, I'm not going to let you guys down. I know I have been recently, but I'm going to turn things around. And I don't. Here's what I would say. I respect and appreciate any player that decides that he wants to embrace fantasy football and the good that it can bring.
Yeah.
I do not begrudge a player who says, kick rocks.
Well
I don't care about your fantasy team, and I'm okay with that, right? Because they really don't have to. Like, they don't owe us anything. They have done more for us in entertainment and enjoyment that I could possibly articulate. So it does, like, it's not a double-edged sword. I don't think it's like two different sides here. I think it's but I do think that the players that are buying into it, I think on average are being received in a way that if I had a player who was thriving in fantasy, I would, like, if I were an agent, I would encourage that player to lean into it, as opposed to that player. Like, it's okay if they begrudge it, but I would tell them, like, it's okay to have some fun with it too, like, because it just endears them to fans even more than they already do on Sundays when they score touchdowns.
Yeah.
Right.
I was so excited to talk to you about this because I just love your perspective being on sort of the front lines, maybe the second line of this. But with the Damar Hamlin, just this crazy event, which was some of the conversations I had with friends were to realize that that's the first time it's ever happened is kind of a miracle. I mean, and granted, it's such a weird, once we all kind of found out medically what had happened, that's just, that happened. It's a lightning strike thing, but still just the fact that someone that had been hurt in a way, it's amazing that for all the years in the NFL, that was the first time that had happened at that level, But why do you think, I'm so curious to know this, why do you think that the world responded, the league responded, other players responded like they did to that? I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that,
I don't think so as well. And there are a lot of factors here. And these are not necessarily in order. They're just kind of as they hit my brain. But I think the popularity of the NFL is a big part of it because I think we all love it so much and we realize how much it means to us. And we realize that, it's not tit for tat. It's not like the players, we don't pay the players to play the game, right? The teams play them, right? And I suppose we in some way pay them because we support them by buying tickets to games and subscribing to the various networks that broadcast these games, right? But Damar Hamlin, I've never done a thing for Damar Hamlin. And as we saw a few weeks ago, he literally put his life on the line to help make a game better and entertain, which in turn would entertain me more, right? And there is a deep appreciation for the physical toll that these players are putting on their body and the probably admission, and it's hard to talk about, that this on average will compromise their long-term health. There are countless players who are in the 50s and 60s, who are in their 50s and 60s now, and they look like they're in their 70s. Their body is in a different state than you'd expect a 52-year-old guy to be. So I think part of it is just the general respect that I think fans showed and do show for football and for athletes in general. I think the reaction of the players made it such a visceral moment.
Wow.
When you see Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, who, two of the best players in the league, and quarterbacks, I think, have this incumbent responsibility to be sort of undeterred, for better or worse. Things go well, they can show emotion, but they still have to, you got to play the next play. And if things go badly, you got to go out and make the next throw. And you could see, both of them were either borderline or in tears. And you're listen, if Josh Allen, maybe the most athletic player in the league, can succumb to tears during this moment, it's you see how vulnerable and how real this is. I think not to be overlooked, of course, is the fact that this happened on Monday Night Football, the only game that was taking place.
Wow.
And it was maybe the most anticipated game of the season. At the time, the two teams had combined for 23 wins, which ESPN put together the stat. It was the most combined wins in the history of a Monday Night Football match. Now, obviously, later in the season, you're more likely to have more combined wins, right? But the stakes were high. So a lot of people were watching it. And if there's 9 games on and you don't see the injury, I just think it takes on a different feel if you see a clip on Twitter, So I think that was part of it too. And then, there's been, Twitter has changed a lot of late, and I think that there are some people that have grown tired of it and maybe decided to put, attention or resources elsewhere. But I did think we saw some good in that moment of social media because, the money raised, that money is going to make a profound impact.
Incredible. And
it's going to do some really good for people.
His goal was $2,500, right? And they raised
so back when he was in
$7
college,
million.
and he's from $2,500 as a college student to $7+ million. And the support has continued in different ways since then. I mean, there have been murals and statues and things built around Buffalo, and I think people are going to continue to do it. And I tend to think that every fan base is pretty unique in the NFL. There are, but some just maybe just amongst the very best. And Buffalo would be right there at the top of the list for me. I mean, the ways that they have embraced their team through good and bad, because obviously it's really good right now, but it hasn't been that way for a long time. The support they show their players is second to none. And I remember when Josh Allen's grandmother was ill, they donated like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Jeez.
And there's now a wing at the local Buffalo Hospital. It's named in her honor. Like, they show out for their players in a way that, like, it's almost like you think they're part of the team. And I know that, for a while Buffalo dealt with the stigma of like what player is going to want to go play in Buffalo, New York. Now it's the kind of place where, I think Buffalo. I think if I were an NFL player and I wanted to go win, that helps. But if I wanted to go have a unique experience, like, throw me to Buffalo right now. It's cool. Really sweet, really special place.
So one last question about that before we get to dad stuff. I feel like the awareness, like you're saying, the popularity of football is on the rise, and it's the most popular sport in the country, and becoming more popular around the world. And I think people's awareness of just how dangerous the game is on the rise. With, now they have the concussion protocol that they have to go through. That's a regular part of the game. What do you feel like the future looks like for the game, in your opinion, from your perspective, with those two things on the rise? If it were some other sport, let's say it were some new sport that came along in the last 10 years, I think it wouldn't be a stretch for somebody to say, like, I don't know if the sport is going to survive due to just how dangerous it is. But given the fact that we're talking about the most popular sport in the country, it's probably not going to happen. But what do you see? Are there any changes that are going to happen beyond what have already happened?
So we are seeing like incremental advancements that I think are important to note. Like, helmet technology has changed dramatically. NFL rules have been modified to protect players more stringently than ever before. And you can only control so much. Right. There are players who violate those rules with hits every week. They are fined heavily as a result of that. It's not like a fine takes away the ability to do it again, but it certainly discourages future behavior. Yeah. I think one of the realities that I've probably come to realize with concussions and potential head injuries is that it strikes me that the short-term impact generally is not as severe as the long-term impact. And that's where it gets scary, right? And I'm not saying that it doesn't mean that these players' health is not as important when they're 30 years removed from the NFL. But the dynamic and the relationship that we have with these players when they're in the prime and the apex of their career, it's just so different than it is when they're 20 years removed from the game, right? If the most, like if Michael Jordan tore his ACL in the middle of the prime of his NBA career, I know this was in the pre-social media era, right? But it would be like the dominant storyline that we would talk about in sports for probably the entire season, right? Not that we don't, like Michael Jordan is basically omnipresent between owning the Hornets and also just his incredible off-court success, but like it's a different reaction, right? Like he reverberates a bit differently now than he did during the prime of his career. So I think that, unfortunately, like I hope, and I'm not naive to think this is going to be the case, but like you hope none of these guys have long-term impacts. But if they're 20 years removed and we hear a story about how a guy is really struggling, it just has and we're all human, right? Like just the emotional attachment you have to these players when they're present and playing is different than when they are retired and they are now former insert team here quarterback. It's just a bit of a different dynamic. So my guess is that football is going to, at least during my lifetime, like not go anywhere. It's going to continue to be very popular. And I think that there's an unfortunate recognition that concussions are like the definition of an occupational hazard for an NFL player, which is a sad reality, but it's not the league's fault. It's not the player's fault. It is the reality of playing a sport that's got some dangerous and violent nature to it. And there are other sports that we love that do pose, maybe not quite to the same level, but do pose some similar threats. I know there's been plenty of research about some of the perils of playing soccer, which you think, like, what? But like, headers turn into concussions and you're not wearing a helmet. So it's scary.
One, too, like what's crazy is, I'm a big soccer fan. 2 years ago with the Euros with Christian Eriksen, who falls
collapsed
over
on the field, right?
and on the field. And that was no contact, too. So it wasn't even, so it is, you make a great point. It is it's scary. But sorry, continue.
No, that's just, I would just say, so there's really no way to like expect it to ever go away. And it's not about blaming. It's not about saying the NFL is doing something wrong or the players are doing something wrong. It's just, I remember when I played football, like that was, and as my wife and I consider, if we have a son one day, like it's gonna be a conversation, and it's gonna be a tough one because this sport has given me more than I could ever possibly imagine. And if my son says, I want to play football, and we have to have that conversation about, should we let him play? The idea of like taking that away from him is in one way like fundamentally wrong.
Right.
But as a parent, isn't your ultimate responsibility the well-being of your kid? And I think that's what we are trying to figure out.
I think if you have a son one day and he comes to you and is like, I'm ready, let's do football, that's when you immediately start talking about how awesome it is to be a kicker,
to play guitar.
Just play guitar.
Yeah.
Play guitar.
It's so funny, you joke, Phil, but it's like part of me, I mean, there's a very real sentiment even in our industry now where it's kind of like, because it's changed so much and a million things that are boring to talk about, but I could see myself in the same way going like, I don't know, maybe football. You've ever thought about being football? Like, let's don't do music, But I'm curious. I mean, as John was saying, do you? I always love asking people in the athletic sphere this because you have a so much more informed take on it from one playing yourself. But I mean, you are front lines for this. I mean, you guys, especially at ESPN, you are the news and information you're getting is the front lines for these kind of things for DeMar Hamlin or even, like I know the injury last night in the Cowboys game. It sounds like he's okay.
Yeah, Russell Gage, really scary. Yeah, it sounds like he's okay, but it was scary.
It's scary.
It's like at the end of the game, in a blowout, you're like, oh my God.
Like you are talking about this professionally in not only podcasts but your shows and everything. And so I'm curious. I mean, is that and also, and I think this is why it is so interesting to me is one of the first things you said is how many friends you have that were in your wedding from your athletic time in college.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, so you have another perspective, which is like, I have some of my closest friends are from playing this game.
Yeah.
So it's a dilemma, and I'm curious, as you were saying, like, how do you make, as a parent, as a dad, and you don't have to worry about the shit, but in assuming that does happen, or even, with your daughter, where it's like she wants to play soccer and she's really good, concussions are a very real thing. I mean, ACLs, MCLs, all the things.
Yeah.
How do you, so knowing what how do you feel like you want to approach that with your wife as parents, in the sports sort of world?
I think what I want to tell myself now is that like you can get not too deep into the weeds, but also can be influenced, I think, fairly and unfairly by your own exposure. And so I need to probably level set when our daughter and we have one who turns 1 this weekend, and we have another one coming in a few months.
Oh my
God!
gosh.
It's going to be absolute mayhem.
Congrats.
Another daughter?
Thank you. Another daughter. Yeah. So we're 2 for 2. So we don't have to have the football conversation yet with her. But it's going to be completely mayhem. Maybe by the time they want to make a decision, I'm just going to be so worn down. They're going to be like, hey, you want to play soccer? How about a motorcycle instead? That seems like fun, right? That'll be awesome for you. But I think it's like the goal, I think, will be to like not look at it through the lens of like all this information I have about like these highly athletic individuals who do professionally and the likelihood of them getting hurt. But like, okay, what is like, I'm sure there's not a pamphlet, but maybe there's a pamphlet somewhere when you go to the youth soccer sign up and it says like, here are the like dangers associated with it. And it's like, 1 out of whatever hundreds or thousands of kids has these issues. And it's like, we have talked, and we're still relatively new to the parent game, as again, just about a year. But one thing that we talk about often is that we feel a great deal of debt to our parents for providing a life that allowed us to live and meet each other and be where we are now. And our goal is to try to give our kids comparable opportunities. They don't have to live our life, but we'd like to present them with some of the opportunities that we were presented with. And sports has been a massive factor in both mine and my wife's life. She's the much better athlete out of the two of us. She was a Division I field hockey player and could kick my tail and everything. So I think we want our kids to be very, we would love for them to enjoy athletics, not because of like the sports themselves, but the relationships and the bonds and the lessons learned there. I think some of it is like just, I hate to use the term calculated risk because it feels like too strong of a connotation, but to like be thoughtful about it. And if we're the only person in the neighborhood that's not letting our daughter play soccer because, I spent too much time thinking about the one incident that took place back in 2021 or something. Like that to me feels like it might be overdoing it as a parent.
Yeah.
So probably it's about being like as fair and justifiable as you can. And of course, also assuming, if our daughter says like, I'd rather kick you than kick a soccer ball. Like, let me get back to my whatever it is that she's instead interested in, then we'll embrace that as well.
Okay, so I know that took a minute, but all that to say, and this is kind of dark, and I don't mean it to be, but it's a genuine question.
Yeah.
On his gravestone, like after he's died, which is sad.
Sure.
We'll miss him, but do you think he'll say stung instead of sting?
I mean, I see where you're going. I just don't think that you should have had the tombstone made yet. That's a little morbid.
It's a new kind of, it's actually a new investment thing. This guy on Instagram sent me is you make these headstones and you sell them to people.
Sure. Oh, okay.
Celebrities, specifically.
Right.
But now I say it out loud and it makes sense. But it's a bad idea.
I'm a little bummed that I invested in this company.
Well, you're in it now, man. But what's funny, speaking of, how great is Field? I mean, how awesome is he? Do you think after this episode, be honest, will your fantasy football league, you think you'll win it next year? Is it yours?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and the singular reason will be this podcast.
Yeah, okay.
Without a doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, with such championship aspirations on your plate, I would imagine it's tough keeping up with your kids' vitamins. Am I right?
Oh, well, I was just thinking about that. Yeah. And thankfully, Dave, Hiya Health is sponsoring today's episode.
Okay.
And with Hiya, you can give your kids the nourishment they need without the unhealthy sugar and the chemicals.
Chemicals are gross.
They're gross.
Count me out.
Yeah.
Hard pass. But Hiya is the pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin that's perfect for picky eaters.
That's right. With zero sugar and zero gummy junk. Hiya is made with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies and 15 essential vitamins and minerals to help support immunity, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, and more.
Nope.
Could you imagine the strength of our superpowers
can't.
had we taken Hiya as kids? I mean,
would
almost
be-
would have been too much.
I'd
We'd be
6'5",
too powerful.
and I could dunk
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Our fame, by the way, would be endless because, but what isn't endless, watch this, is Hiya's incredible formula that's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else you can imagine. It's designed for kids for all ages and sent straight to your door so parents have one less thing to worry about.
That's right. But guys, don't just take our word for it.
No.
Here's a quote from a real parent.
Here
They
we go.
said, quote, "My kids love Hiya vitamins. They actually remind me to give them the vitamins every day. And the stickers that come with the first order were so much fun to decorate the bottle
That's
with."
right. Listen,
Unquote.
my kids love that bottle. I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
the lure at this point. It's like you can see the beauty.
Yeah. It's priceless art. Yeah. Give your kids the nourishment that they need and the taste they love with Hiya vitamins. We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. You can receive, get this, Dave. Sit down. You need to sit
Okay,
for
sorry,
this.
sorry. Okay, now.
Sit. No, not on the floor. Just sit on the chair.
Sorry.
You can receive 50% off
Now
your
I've got to
first
stand up.
order.
I got to stand up. It's too good. To claim this deal, guys, you must go to hiyahealth.com/Dadville. This deal is not available on their regular website.
So go to hiyahealth.com/Dadville and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. Should we invite him in?
Is he on the roof blowing it off?
We're talking about sports specifically, but it really bleeds over into anything. Like there are risks involved in everything. And really, when you analyze our lives, we really have a kind of a hilarious, like, blind eyes turned to things that we worry about. You know what I mean? Like, we have outsized fears. I fear, like, somebody breaking into the house while we're all asleep. As a dad, like, that's a thing, right? But I should be more worried about getting hit in my car when statistically, there are all these actual risks that we really normalize and don't really, worry about. And you got to live your life. And one thing that Dave and I talk about a lot on this podcast is how we don't just transfer all of our stuff onto our kids, because we've had a lot of, like, professionals on here who have taught us stuff. And the number one thing that I have learned is that a lot of the things that I worry about as a dad are just my things, that I am actually just projecting onto my kids. And, and it's just so hard to not do that. And I know that you're just, like you said, a year in. But one of the questions that I always want to ask dads on this podcast is what are the things that when you go to bed at night, you lay your head on the pillow and you kind of look back on your day as a dad, what are the things that you worry about? What are the things that kind of keep you up as a parent?
Yeah, I think more so than anything, and this is maybe because our daughter's at a pretty formative age at a year old where she's now got teeth and she just started to walk, and there are a lot of things that are happening all at once. Mm-hmm. No question in my mind that amongst there are several things, but the thing that at least has weighed on me most heavily of late is, are we doing this right? And not and getting stuck the comparison game. I was with a friend this past weekend who's got an 8-month-old, and they were like, yeah, she takes one nap a day and she sleeps for 13 to 14 hours at night. 13 to 14 hours. We get 12 usually, and sometimes it's a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more. And I'm like, one nap a day. I mean, our daughter takes 2 naps a day, which admittedly breaks the day up a lot, right? But I'm like, she's a year old. By 9:30 or 10 o'clock, her gas tank is empty. She doesn't want to go run around and do stuff. She wants to go jump in her crib for an hour and a half. So, we have friends who have a child that's younger than ours, and they were with us, and we had a bottle with formula in it, and they're like, "She takes formula still?" I'm like, "Is that not normal?" They're like, "Oh, we do maybe a bottle at nighttime," and I was like, "Oh crap!" I pop a bottle in there every night without question, and during the day I always have one handy. Our daughter eats a lot of food, and she's got teeth now, so she can chomp on. If she wants leftovers, she'll take my leftovers. But it's the fear of, and maybe it's because it's the first one.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because we live in a comparative size society. But I always tell, we live in maybe I'm overdoing it because of just being in the present. But we live in such a comparative society. I always talk about it it's a wonderful and it's a very powerful tool for my industry and certainly your industry as well, both in music and podcasts too. But I'm like, isn't it kind of amazing that when you go to someone's Instagram profile, it shows how many followers they have, as if that matters? Does it make you more important because you've got 10,000 and your neighbor has 120, right? That everything is comparative. I posted on Instagram and I've got 30,000 followers. Sweet. I posted on Instagram and I have 37. Does that mean that my picture is irrelevant? So it's a weird, and I think that unfortunately my mindset has probably taken some of that comparative sort of just mentality and applied it to parenthood. I'm always wondering, are we doing this right? And maybe 10 years from now, maybe a year from now, I'll laugh and say, dude, she walks, she talks, and she chews her food. You're fine.
Yeah.
But for now, you're sort of ugh.
How are you feeling going in with the second one now? How are y'all?
Completely ignoring it. And I mean that half facetiously, right? But I remember the first pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I always laugh. I'm you realize that a pregnancy is, first of all, closer to 10 than it is 9 months, right?
Yeah.
And second of all, and maybe you guys have moved to you're far enough removed from having your children that you don't think of it this way anymore. But when someone asks me now, how far along is my wife? The first one taught me, we speak in weeks, right? Hey, we're 17 weeks here, right? But during the first one, I could tell you, hey, we were 22 weeks, 3 days, 4 hours, and 37 seconds into it.
Totally.
Now I'm I think we're somewhere in the second trimester, maybe 4 months or so, June. So what June's 4 months from now? About 4 months.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and part of that's because you're so busy with your first child that you've got that to take care of you. But I think the other thing is that we know, even if we are capable parents, we know it's going to be. So many people have warned us about the jump from 1 to 2, and how you can 2-on-1 defense is a lot easier than 1-on-1 defense, and that's what we're about to dive into. So we have gotten ourselves ready as far as we can this at this juncture of the pregnancy, and we'll continue to do so. But I'm also gonna have to tell myself that I've just started to sleep kind of normally again.
Oh yeah,
got routine and all those things, and now, like, I can probably kiss some of those things goodbye, but I don't know. I mean, maybe I was going to say, I'm sorry to get sappy, but this is the perfect place to do it, right? But it's like I actually had this past weekend with my daughter by myself. My wife went on a girls' trip, which was great. She deserves it. Moms deserve every single thing in the world. There's no two ways about that. And before she left, I was kind of like, this will be interesting, right? Like all week, basically 3 days by myself, long weekend. And like last night when the baby was asleep, I was like, that's the most special 3 days that we'll ever have, right? Like we didn't do anything. Like we barely left the house. We live in Connecticut. It's cold. It's not like we're out like playing in the park all day, right? But it's like I like chased her around the house for like 3 hours at a time. She took naps. We ate pouches and bananas and toast, and like that was it. And you're like, that's the coolest thing ever. So it's funny how much change. 15 years ago, like my idea of like a wild Saturday night compared to like, Saturday night, like I watched the Jaguars and the Chargers while I had the monitor next to me and my baby slept peacefully. It's like 15 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, so I'm on my third Jaeger bomb. I can barely see out of my left eye, but we're having a blast, like just a little different 15 years later.
Man, I will say so I have 2 girls as well, and it is the best. So just get ready. But I will say, when you were talking about, you have a lot of friends who have prepared you for how different it is going from 1 to 2 than 0 to 1. And so much of that, for us at least, so much of the climate of what having our second daughter was like was determined by our oldest. I mean, she set the climate for all that, and it was drastically different from the first time.
But I'm hoping you're not going to follow up and tell me if you tell me that like your first like slept really well and ate really well and your second one didn't. I don't want to. Like, I'm gonna pull my headphones out for a second because ours is a good eater, a good sleeper.
Yeah. Neither one of ours slept well or ate well. But the second one, when we had our second one, we had this cute little Luca who was adorable and was a complete tyrant and was just wanting to, like, she wanted to hold her little baby sister, but then if we turned our head, she would, like, throw her on the ground or something like that, So you have to deal with that. But I wanted to say, one of the sweetest things about that early experience was the time that I got with Luca, because, as in the beginning, you're the helper.
Useless.
Like you are the second role for sure. And then when the second one comes along, now I kind of took on more of a first role with Luca, and I was taking Luca on these little, take her to the park while Amy can get some sleep, while Livy's asleep, all that kind of stuff. So that is a real sweet thing that you will experience more and more of.
I can already envision that too, which gives you some optimism and hope. And I know it's going to be like special, and it's going to be it's going to be surreal. And I'm already looking forward to the interactions the two of them have. I grew up with a brother who is the gap's a little bit larger. He's less than 2 years, but not quite as small as the gap will be between our 2 daughters. And, he's my best friend, and we had so many laughs growing up. And my parents and my mom have shared all the funny memories of what things were like when we were toddlers. And I know there's going to be so much greatness ahead. And the beginning it'll be parenting is what it will be. But that's, if we learned it, if we survive the first one, I have a feeling.
And you'll probably forget most of it. You know?
Oh, I've already, there are so many things that I've already forgotten about the first time around that I've just sort of reminded myself. I'm like, oh, wait, like various like patterns of behavior from the kids at a certain age. And we don't I forgot that you spend the first 3 months, you're constantly burping a child, right? You constantly have to have a burp rag somewhere. I'm like, I don't she's not a particularly clean eater. She's she's right. She's gonna eat, and then we're gonna change because she's gonna have completely spilled everything.
Right.
But
John is
it's not like I'm sitting there one bite down, burp. It's I gotta it's hopefully it is like riding a bike though. Once you get back to that newborn stage,
well, it is crazy how many things you forget that you were so worried about. You know what I mean? They will go through these little phases where, like Luca, our oldest, she went through this phase where she was scratching herself in her sleep. We would clip her nails as low as we could clip them. And then she would just, in her sleep, she would just kind of like scratch her face, and then it would scab, and then she'd pull the scab out. And we were so worried about it because it was like she would wake up and look like she had just been in an accident or something like that. And then one day it just goes away, and you know, one day you're looking through pictures and you're like, oh my gosh, she used to do that. When did she stop doing it? I don't even remember.
And at the time, it just felt like
it was we were really worried about it. Yeah. We were like, can we get like mittens that we can lock on her hands? You know,
the iPhone like does a great job of making those memories that you see every once in a while to pop up. And so I'll be able to go through like early phases, and I'm like, oh crap, I do remember that. Like, I remember like, you know, remember that she had baby acne for 3 days, and all of a sudden it's like your kid's face just turns red, and you're like, oh my God, she'll never be seen in public again. And the doctor was like, it'll probably be gone in a day, maybe a week, but don't worry about it. And then like 3 days later, she's like, you know, back to like, you know, she looks like she just went to a makeup artist, and you're like, wow, these like I you know, like agonized thinking there was something wrong with her the first time for the first hour when she. You get like a little irritation. So I think probably the biggest lesson that I hope that we've learned from 1 to 2 is like sort of knowing when to be seriously concerned and when to understand that like these little things are built to last. They're quite durable and they're tough and they're resilient. And they are. We don't give them enough credit in their early stages of life.
Well, that's for sure. That's really well said. Yeah. So okay, so first of all, thank you for hanging so much. We always end with 2 questions. I'll ask you the first one.
For this.
What is the one thing you want your girl/girls to know?
That is a good one. You know, I've thought about this. I don't. I have to. You know, I should. There should be a Is there a requirement that like every song that a musician writes, there has to be like a backstory that's describing it, right? Like,
of course.
What was what's the origin of "Remember That I Still Love You"? What is the origin of that song?
Oh man,
Dave? Not to put you on the spot.
Look at you. You know, John can attest to this too. It's really tricky when you start having kids as a songwriter because you suddenly realize like it is hard not to write every song about your kids. Yeah. Like I make this joke live all the time when I play any of those songs because it's just like all of a sudden you have this thing and you're like, oh, I care so much about this and I have so much inspiration around it. So. That was one that I was writing with a buddy, and we started one idea, and it was hysterical. He laughed at me the whole day because I don't write a lot with other people for my own music, and so we had started this idea, and it was like clear as a bell that I was like, oh my gosh, do you know what this has to be about? And he was like, what? I was like, this has to be at my kids, and I started immediately getting emotional, and he was like, whoa, and I was like, yep, sorry, let me just pull it together. And so we wrote it so fast because it was just one of those rare moments where the mood or whatever was happening, I was like, oh, I think this has to be this, which is, you know, that's sort of where that came from.
Well, I mean, that song hits way different once you become a dad. I'll tell you that. Oh
my gosh!
Like, listen, I'm like, geez, I'm like crying on my walk with my daughter. Like, you okay? I'm like, it's just a little windy out. I'm okay. But it does remind me of what I want my daughters to know, and like they'll never know they will never know the version of me that was before their arrival, right?
Wow.
And I hope, like, I've thought about this. Like, they're going to be, you know. Every kid will have moments of vulnerability. I think that I've seen girls. I had a younger sister, and I've seen young girls who could be nasty to each other at any age. But you know, teenage years can be tough. I have a cousin who's 14 years younger than I am, so we were very close, and you know, I sort of saw her like grow through. She's going to be a senior in college, or she's now a junior in college, and I've seen her go through those stages a little more closely. And sometimes I'm like just baffled by just how like petty and sort of like cruel and unusual they are to each other. But and moments of vulnerability are very much innate in all of us. But I remember thinking, I heard that song and I was like, you know something, I'm not sure that, I don't know what age they will get to the point where they'll understand what I mean when I tell them how I feel about them. Certainly not at this age, and certainly probably not for the next few years here, right? But when will they be able to emotionally understand when I describe the way that they make me feel, what that actually means? And maybe it's not until they're the age I'm at right now, and when they have their kids of their own. But that will be the one thing, is that like when those moments of vulnerability hit, or when someone tries to make you feel like you're insignificant or any sort of way, that I feel a certain way about them that I hope makes them feel worthwhile and know that like we're all imperfect. And I admit that maybe that song has been more relevant in my mind knowing that I was going to be on the show today and just thinking about it. And like it just has been a message that I think has stuck with me. So thanks to you for articulating it certainly way better than I ever could. And it's something that one day when all of our kids are doing their own version of Kidsville podcast, they can reminisce about this conversation, these lessons.
We need to go ahead and trademark that, John. That's a good idea.
I know. I got a feeling your kids are going to be all very talented. So my daughters I don't know what they'll be able to bring to the table musically. My wife and I. My wife can play the guitar.
There you go.
I'm tone deaf.
So there's some in there.
We're halfway there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel like you said. It probably won't be until they have kids of their own because you just can't pass it on.
I've connected with my parents more since I became a parent, just because I realized you were like by the time I was 25, it's not like my parents were watching over me and supporting me financially and doing things, wiping my butt literally as I am right now, right? But it's like. And they're far removed from it, and my sister's the youngest, and she's 33, so we're a long way from where we are right now as parents ourselves. But you're just like, man, this job is more than I could ever reasonably ask someone to do for me, and they did it. Never had any qualms about it. Never asked for anything in return, and I hope I'm not realizing it too late. But I'm going to make sure that I do my best to convey to them just how much I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. Even today, after lunch, I was cleaning up the kitchen, and half of the stuff I was cleaning up was stuff the kids did. And I thought to myself, I was like, isn't it so interesting that so much of my life, and Lord knows my wife Annie's life, is serving these kids who have zero idea that we're serving them. Yeah. And it's just, and thankfully, thank the Lord, like we do it because it's like, that's what you do. You love to do. I mean, some days it's annoying, but I just thought, isn't it, as I was cleaning, I was like, I'm just cleaning up their messes right now, and I have and I'm like, isn't it? And they have no clue. And I think to your point, once you start having kids, I'm in that moment going, God, my parents did this for 18 years, and arguably a couple after
had
that.
7 kids, and you're like, geez, like they just keep doing it, and
you just serve. You're just always serving. You're just
decades.
always serving. It's
crazy. They gotta have when they have their own kids, they'll realize it. And until then, my kids are like, well, yeah, you clean that up. Like the sky's blue,
your dad,
and the grass is green, and you clean up all my messes. Like,
correct.
That's the
what else
water we
swim here for. Yeah.
Okay, last question. What do you want your girls to say at your funeral?
Ooh, wow, that one I hadn't thought about. So I've always thought when I've been to a few funerals that have been. Like packed houses, and you're just like, that right there is kind of like, that tells it all, right? If a lot of people show up for you, and maybe it's more likely to happen when you unfortunately pass at a younger age, as you get older, obviously many of your friends maybe have already passed themselves, right? But I think that speaks volumes. And I would say probably more than anything, and it's something that I've learned from my own mom, because I think she really embodies the spirit very well, is my mom has an inability, and it's the greatest thing about her, to put herself first. She is physically and literally incapable of doing it. She is about to turn 70, and she probably could retire if she wanted to, but she still works. She's a real estate agent. She's vibrant. She's got this energy about herself, and it's like she can't for a second turn everything else off and just go live her life. And I think I've realized as my parents got to a certain age, like I kind of want them to do what they want to do. Like there's only so much time left. I'm not going to, if my mom said I'm going to go buy a boat and go live on the Atlantic Ocean, I'd probably talk her out of it, right? But when she says, hey, I'm thinking about going on she went to Portugal for a couple of weeks right after Christmas. And she sort of tossed the idea around, what do you think? And I'm like, Mom, that sounds awesome. You should do that. Yeah. Go, don't think twice. Go enjoy it. Have some fun. Go for a month. I don't care. Right? Do your thing, right? But she will just not live for herself, and she's physically capable of doing that. Maybe there'll be a time where she's not as willing, but I remember a couple days after our daughter was born, my mom, who lives about an hour and a half away from us, showed up, and we didn't have plans to have a bunch of people down, but we also weren't going to close the doors if people tried to show up. she showed up and she came down and she had full car of groceries, and she was like, I'm here until you tell me to leave. And I was just like, you know something? At the time, we kind of needed a little bit of that support, right? You're overwhelmed. You're wondering, can I do anything? The first night home from the hospital, our daughter did not sleep at all. And it was me who stayed up with her. My wife was, obviously she'd been through, that's just physical. That's a physical trauma that I can't even begin to articulate. And I remember that first night, it was the moment where I remember telling myself, asking myself, am I cut out for this? And I remember my mom coming down, and it was just sort of like, it was a little bit of balance for both of us. She came down and she said, I'm just here to do whatever. And it was like, if you want me to leave right now, I'll go. If you want me to stay for a week, I'll stay for a week. And I thought that was sort of emblematic of how she is. So I want my daughters to say at my funeral that I put others first always. And I hope that that's a spirit that I embody now, but I'd like to continue to do so and probably do it more, because I think there's probably always room to do it more.
God, that's beautiful.
And one last thing. I gave good fantasy advice. That will be important to me, too.
Of course. Oh, my gosh, of course.
That feels like a very important thing.
Oh, my gosh.
To be remembered for, right?
Dude, thank you so much for your time. And thanks
This
for
was
being
a blast,
on.
man.
This was
Thanks
awesome.
for coming on.
This was,
And congratulations on girl number 2.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank
That's
you.
right.
Yeah, we're screwed, but it's going to be awesome.